our student wellness. Every year, we need to bring before the board our mental health plan, and Mr. Pesch in just a few minutes will share more information about that plan as that we submit to the Department of Instruction every year. We've also added in here, because certainly a request from last month, some information about how we are tracking data. So we'll also be sharing a little bit about that. So our desired outcomes today are really just to make sure we communicate about how that school-based mental health plan, improvement plan aligns with policy SHLT 003 and the supporting of student mental health through training protocols and targeted interventions. We also want to make sure that we highlight the district's collaborative approach to mental health services, showcasing the roles of partnerships with community agencies and the expansion of school-based mental health programs to meet the needs of our learners. And then we also want to, as I mentioned earlier, provide some data showing the progress towards that strategic plan goal, improving well-being for our students. So as always, we want to make sure we're aligning to our strategic plan. We are certainly focused on priority 2, student dispositions and well-being. As you all know better than anyone, the student wellness is woven throughout the strategic plan. We will specifically today talk a lot about attendance and just overall student well-being as we're looking at some outcomes. And I am going to turn it over to Mr. Pesch.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all again, talking about mental health. This is our 5th time that we've come to you to talk about the school mental health plan that began after it was passed into law in 2020. And today we're going to be looking at the 9 components that are part of this plan, but we only want to focus on the ones that are directly related to services to students. And that's going to be the reporting to NCDPI, early intervention, mental and social emotional wellness, referrals, treatment and reentry, suicide risk protocols, and then also our stakeholder engagement. So we want to start out on this slide. On the right-hand side first is our component reporting to DPI. Each year in September, it was due yesterday, we just submitted it. We sent it into DPI, our Healthy Active Children report, which includes the school mental health policy. And also, as of next year, we'll have a revision of that plan, and we will need the board to approve that. They do that every 5 years. But on the left-hand side, we want to first talk about early intervention and mental health, social, emotional health and wellness component. We are doing very well with this one component, and I'll give you a couple of examples of how we're doing this. Second step, of course, you're very familiar with, is one of our first programs that helps students build social emotional skills, such as nurturing positive relationships, managing emotions, and meeting goals. We also have check-in and check-out. That is part of our early intervention, and that is a Tier 2 and Tier 3 behavior intervention tool that also is focused on helping to build relationships for students. Also, we started our Teen Mental Health First Aid program, and this is a program that helps students to identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental health and substance abuse challenges with friends and with peers. The training gives the teen some skills to be able to have supportive conversations with their friends and then get help from a responsible adult. It was implemented in one of our alternative schools last spring, and the Youth Mental Health Program, which is a similar program, but it's for the adults in the school, is now a requirement for all of our counseling and students support staff personnel. And we're planning on expanding these programs this year and in coming years. Also, we have the Say Something program. This is part of the compliance with the North Carolina General Statute that requires schools to offer a safe and anonymous reporting tool for students. The Say Something anonymous reporting system was implemented to middle and high schools last school year, and it teaches the middle and high school students to recognize signs and signals of at-risk behaviors, especially around social media, and when and how to speak up and how to get help from a trusted adult. Also talks about how to report concerns anonymously through the Crisis Center. And then we also have now our Protecting Our Students Act, which was signed into law October 2023. This year we are now starting the training and showing the videos to students that are in grades 6 through 12. That is supports focused on improving student safety, particularly against sexual misconduct. It was signed into law, like I said, in October 23. Has three main components: standardizing the definitions and increasing penalties for sexual misconduct by educators, increasing penalties for all those who fail to report such misconduct, and requiring schools to show these videos. So that is something new that we are starting to implement this school year. For the next component I want to talk about was stakeholder engagement. We are not doing this work in isolation. We have a number of community partnerships that we are working with Wake County Public Schools. One of the main ones, of course, is our partnership with Alliance Healthcare, which helps to coordinate mental health services to students through the care coordination program, reentry coordination, trainings, and program planning. There are also many other community agencies that we have partnerships with in the district. They are part of committees and collaboratives that help guide the work that we do with our students and families. We also have parent representation on these committees and also have student voice that is part of the mental health committee, as well as now the youth mental health advisory group. We also, for the component of suicide risk referral protocol, we've been able to meet this for many years. We now have an enhanced suicide assessment and intervention protocol training, which includes the resources needed to recognize, screen, and intervene to support students managing suicidal thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, procedures to appropriately respond to utilizing evidence-based tools, and guidance to effectively facilitate suicide risk assessments, communicating clearly with caretakers, and documenting the concerns and following up. I will say that we have now over 700 specialized instructional support personnel who've been trained on this new protocol. And we also want to add that with HB 605, which became effective October 2024, it requires the district to establish a multidisciplinary behavioral threat assessment team. And we have that training as well now, which also includes the anonymous reporting system with Say Something that is embedded in that process. And it's the application we use for the middle and high schools that's required by law. Next, for the referral, treatment, and reentry, we're continuing to do work to connect students and families to the needed services for mental health. For families who have a student with a need to connect in the community who are experiencing barriers, we have the Alliance school-based teams and their care coordination services. That is for a student who needs something, but the family's having a barrier of some type. It could be transportation or lack of understanding and navigating the process, so we assign them a care coordinator to walk them through the entire process of getting connected, staying connected, and making sure that there's continuity of care for the student. We also have a process in place with Alliance Health with many of our mental health facilities around the county. When a student enters one of these facilities with parent permission and a release of information that's signed, we get notice on a daily basis through a briefing of students who enter the facility, so we can then help with the discharge planning and return to school for any of these students who enter these identified facilities. We also have the same process for long-term care in a psychiatric residential treatment facility, which we call a PRTF. We have staff who attend these meetings on a regular basis once the student is admitted there, and then help with discharge planning again to bridge them back to school. And of course, we have our school-based mental health program, and here on the screen you'll see 10 of our vendors that we have now. 8 of them are local agencies who are working with us. You see 2 there, Daybreak Health Services, who we highlighted last month, who provides teletherapy, and we just added Hazel Health, who also is providing teletherapy services to our students. With this, we are now, I had on my notes 125 schools, but since I prepared this, we now are in 130 schools. It's increasing by the week because as these vendors that we're partnering have increased staff and capacity, we're able to pick up more and more schools. Also with Daybreak and Hazel Health, since they are a national group and they have quite a number of therapists, we are slowly getting them into more schools, and we hope to be in all of our schools by the end of this school year, mainly due to the services of the teletherapy program. So as Ms. Woodson talked about, we wanted to look at some of the metrics. So we have all these services. What does it mean in terms of what is the outcome for the students who are needing the support? Some key data metrics that we wanted to tell you we're monitoring. One is, of course, the SEL data. And this is progress that we want to make sure that we're meeting our goal, Goal 5, by 2028, 90% of our students will demonstrate SEL competencies. You see the 5 competencies listed there. I'm going to go into each one in detail in a couple of slides to show you where we've gone from 2024 to 2025. We have our behavioral health data utilizing the BIMUS to identify students who may be able to benefit from additional supports at schools for behavioral health over time. We have our attendance and discipline data that we're looking at very closely. We know that those two are very connected with students who are not coming to school and mental health and behavioral health issues. Student survey data, we're getting information and data points back from students. And then access to support services, monitoring the ratio of specialized support staff, always trying to increase the number of counselors, social workers, and psychologists we have and improving that ratio. So when we get this data, there's a couple things we want to look at to make sure we stay on target. One is, does it identify the needs? Data is used to identify trends and pinpoint students in schools that require targeted interventions. We're not just kind of doing an approach where everybody gets the same thing. Sometimes we have to do customized approaches. It informs our interventions. When we go into a school, what type of services do the students need? It helps us to allocate the resources so we know exactly how many days, for example, a social worker may need to be at a school versus other schools. And then also promoting equity, disaggregating data by student demographics to eliminate disparities and ensuring support is provided equitably across all student groups. So let's take a look at some of the data here. I'm going to go through the 5 competencies for SEL. The first one we want to talk about is self-awareness. The larger gauge that you see on the right side of the screen shows you the progress we made as a district from 2024 to 2025. We've come up 1 percentage point. In elementary schools and high schools, it's a small, again, 1 to 3 percentage point increase. In the high schools, we're seeing a 3% increase in middle schools, for self-awareness. Self-management, we're seeing a 1% increase as a district. Again, elementary, 3%, high schools have gone up 1%, and in middle schools, we're seeing a 4% gain with self-management. Social awareness, we saw a 5% jump from last school year, with middle schools going 6% percentage points up, and elementary is taking just 2%, high schools 4%. And then in relationship skills, we saw a 6% jump in the district, with elementary being a 3% increase, middle school showing a nice 9% growth there, and high schools having a 4% increase. And then finally, with responsible decision making, we saw 2% growth across the district. And in elementary, we saw a 3% increase. Middle schools, we saw 5%, and a 1% increase in high schools. So the good news is, while just a few percentage points from most of the competencies as a district level, we are seeing some nice strides for middle schools and all of the grade levels for each competency in social emotional learning. And then finally, we just wanted to show you this. This is just kind of a quick snapshot of outputs. So what we looked at was outcomes. And the state is now asking us to provide some data on the number of things we do at schools, from the school counseling, school psychology, and school social work department. So here you'll see, for example, school counselors. They had last school year individual student contacts that were over 164,000 contacts. They had almost 2,000 small group student contacts, almost 26,000 classroom student contacts. School psychologists had 3,300 individual student contacts. And then for school social work, we had almost 139,000 student contacts. And then broken down, we see some of that was almost 6,000 McKinney Vento assessments that were done. And then for all of our specialized instructional support personnel, we did 3,356 suicide assessments, 1,751 threat assessments, and we had 377 Alliance Healthcare coordination referrals that came in. So that's just a quick snapshot of some of the direct contacts that our counseling and student services staff had with students. So at this time, there's a lot of data to give you and a lot of information. We'd like to see what questions and comments you have.
Yes, well, thank you all for presenting this to us. And again, I think it's important for us to highlight gains, growths, and what the work that we have to do to get to these targets that we have laid out in our strategic plan. So I'll just open up for questions, and we just want to go around. Ms. Rice, I'll start with you.
Well, you know I love mental health. I'm going to always be a champion for it, and I think that today, Mr. Pesh, you all did an amazing job with sharing what we are trying to do and what direction that we are going in Wake County. I'm very proud of the data and information that you've shared and the models that you guys are constantly creating around mental health. It is my heart's desire to see that self-care culture just integrated within all that we do, from leadership down to the school base of students, and to continue to see these numbers rise every year with those core competencies that you shared with us. I just have about 2 questions that I want to ask, because I'm very excited, so I'm really trying to calm down on the inside. So, because I got excited over here when I heard you talk about mental health first aid, okay? So, I do want to ask, first thing I do want to say is thank you all for even beginning to do that. So I've been in Wake a long time, and to watch the progression around sharing mental health within our school base has not always been where we wanted, but I see you guys really moving in the right direction. Thank you for starting Teen Mental Health First Aid in the alternative schools. And so what does the plan of action look like moving forward with training more students, and what outcomes are you all actually trying to achieve as a district?
It's going to be Dr. Corliss-Thompson.
I knew it. I was waiting for my friend to come to the table.
We tried to get her to come.
I wasn't going to call you out, but I was going to call you in a minute, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you, Ms. Rice.
So where we are with Teen Mental Health First Aid, as you may be aware, that UNC Behavioral Health Springboard is the arm of, they've gotten the money to kind of put the seed in, so going on in their direction. Our plan is to, at least this school year, to be able to onboard at least 2 other alternative schools. We wanted to start small, just to kind of see where we are. So the plan is to have 2 additional schools. In the long term, it is to begin to move it out to other schools, and part of that is not just our school staff. One of the visions we have is to actually offer sessions in youth mental health first aid for parents as well. We know that's a request. But for the teen mental health first aid, at least 2 other additional schools, alternative schools this year, and then branching out to include regular schools. We do it by invitation of the principals, so we're trying to get the word out to let them know, hey, we're here, we can do this. So whatever help we can get to sort of promote that is where we want to do. We already have our own instructors to provide training. We have 8, 4 of whom are teen mental health first aid instructors. So it's a matter of, again, we are essentially trying to get people to get on board with us to do that and go in by invitation and offer it.
I love that. And so the next piece that I want to ask is around, you mentioned briefly about the youth mental health first aid, and I just really, I'm bringing you out there because it's really that important. It really is a aid and a tool to help each other recognize signs and symptoms within our students and that engagement. So even though we're offering it to, and I'm going to say this out loud because other people may not know, with the teen mental health first aid, we do know that we have to have a certain amount of percentage, 10% of the staff that has to be trained in the youth mental health first aid for it to actually happen. So when we're doing that with the next 2 alternative schools, are we only focusing on those, that 10%? Are we still possibly using some funds to train staff who are interested in being trained as well with the youth mental health first aid?
Yes to all parts, yes to it. So of course, actually they've lowered the limit. It's now 5%.
Okay.
It's not hard to meet 5%.
Right.
And so what we do when we're going into a school, we'll say, survey your staff, let us know how many people have taken youth mental health first aid. And they can pretty much meet that mark. If they don't have that number, again, because we have instructors, we can provide the training for them, so it's easily to scale up pretty quickly.
Right.
And then with the assistance and support from UNC Behavioral Health Springboard, they actually come in and then they facilitate and coordinate for the Teen Mental Health First Aid. We just provide the instructors and we provide the organization and structure around it. So yes, we will train anybody. If you move, we will train you, pretty much.
And just to add to that, we're also training our student support services staff members in every building, so that we're moving, trying to get it out through that as well.
Yeah, so Dr. Taylor and Vice Chair Swanson, and as we continue to move forward with this in our budgets, I think it's necessary through the climate that we're seeing in society today and just overall well-being and health. I would love to see it even as a part of the onboarding process. When we hire new people that coming in, just like CPR is, mental health first aid should just be a part of what we do as an onboarding practice to help people be aware, to save the lives of so many. That's all I'm going to say, and I'm going to be quiet.
Can I tag one more thing? I'm really glad you said that, because this just literally came about in the last little bit, but as I have been a part of a team with regards to our bus drivers, we started having this conversation, and Dr. Thompson-Drew has created a virtual course for bus drivers to get some of those very same skills, so that we can even in that avenue try to expand that as well.
That's good. I wasn't sure if we were only doing the in-person, or would we given options to do in-person and virtual.
We
with
can
mental health first
do
aid.
both. My instructors are versed in both, and it kind of depends on the preference. So, whatever people need to have it done, that's what we do. I prefer in person, but we do offer the virtual option as well.
Yeah. And my last thing, if I can, Vice Chair, is with that being said, I'm going to say this out loud. What about our leadership team as we move forward, Dr. Taylor? SELT teams and folks need to be trained in mental health first aid. I'm trying to help us save our lives now. So that as we engage with people, we won't think other things, but we can ask different questions and spark conversations as we develop healthy relationships with each other, so that we can keep each other alive, and just notice some things and how to handle people differently as we deal with them in leadership. Because 1 in 5 live with a mental illness, count in the room. Somebody here is dealing with something. But we just know how to handle it well. But doesn't mean it's okay. That's it.
Yes. Impact of the lost grant on what we hope to achieve and the impact of the general plan.
My question, Mr.
I
Hirsch.
know, right?
Well, they kind of, I saw it
ain't
on the
gonna ask.
screen and I was like, they're going to say something. Nope, they're not. I'm going to ask them.
So impact, well, what could have been, right? We would have had 20 of our own therapists hired to the school system. We were all there. We had positions created, posted. We were actually interviewing and actually ready to offer some jobs. So what you didn't get is we didn't get those 20 in-person therapists. That would have made it better. But with the high number of our community partners, we're able to kind of make that up somewhat. We're still going to get the services into schools that we want to get. I still think it's a goal to shoot for down the road, because in-person is always, it's going to be important to have that, especially as you talk about elementary schools. They need to have the manipulatives and play therapy. You need to have someone in person for elementary. Now, Daybreak and Hazel can do virtual work with families, but you can't do that with a second grader alone in a room with a screen. So they do family work, which is great. It's great, and we're seeing some real big benefits from that. But it's always good to have an in-person therapist in front of children. So something for us to continue to work towards. But it didn't completely knock us down where, we could still make it, get the help into schools that we need.
So some might listen to this and they talk about our budget. Can you explain why a school system does this work?
Why a school system does
All the mental
of this.
health work that we're doing.
So We know that academics are important. That's what we measure, right? We look at grades, we look at all those metrics. But we know that children come to us when they cross that threshold and come into a school. They're not just coming with their minds ready to learn math and reading and everything else. They come with a whole lot of other issues, coming with food, housing, mental health issues. And we know that a child who is, if we can't meet those basic needs, right, not much more is going to happen. And we know before the pandemic hit, we were starting to see numbers increasing, especially with suicide ideation. And then the pandemic hit and things just started really kind of escalating in terms of mental health issues. We know that they're there for adults too, not just children. And so it would be quite a disservice to ignore those issues and think that we're going to somehow get, productivity out of students and not address those issues. We have them for the vast majority of their waking time. Why would we not address that during the school day? And for some of these with the teletherapy, they're doing this in the evenings and on weekends. So we're really able to help meet the families where they are. It's not just while they're in school too. We're really branching out.
That's great. The final questions I have for now are can you just expand a little bit on the Say Something and why 6th grade is the lowest grade for that at this point?
I can. So the actual legislation mandates middle and high school. Say Something does have a lower extension for 4th and 5th grade. They do have that now, and our district team is looking into how we will do that. We had anticipated last year that we'd do it last spring, but there was a lot going on because we onboarded everybody else. So it's on the table for us to discuss in terms of how we would do that, what it would look like, because we have far more elementary schools. But the law only requires middle and high school. 4th grade and 5th grade are not, but we potentially will be moving there.
And you probably said it already during the presentation, but can you just explain what Say Something is again?
Sure, absolutely. So Say Something is an anonymous reporting system. And again, that's required. And the requirement is that we provide some anonymous system, train students on how to use it so they can report concerning behaviors. The Sandy Hook program, the people that developed Say Something, these are families who lost their own children in Connecticut, right? And so they created this program as a way for people to report behaviors that are concerned. Sometimes our kids they know things. They know things we don't know, right? And they have a really good pulse on what's going on. And they often feel safer if they can share that with someone anonymously. And this allows them to do that without having to give their name or do any other kind of face what they might think is retribution. The system itself, they can call by phone, they can text, or they can just do it online. Most of our students use their phones. And that means they can use, well, not now with the phone policy, they can use, at any point they see something, they can report it. And as a district, I think when we first started, we thought it was really going to be difficult, but I think we've seen some really good returns around that, right? Our students are using the system, the school teams are able to respond, and they're able to reach out, connect those students as need be, and provide us support for them. But the system itself is really about another avenue for our kids to report behaviors that are concerning and making sure they're reporting to a trusted adult, right? And not just kind of trying to make decisions on their own around it.
So you brought up the cell phone policy. When we talk about this with students, are we giving them okay, we know you can't take out your cell phone and do it, or maybe that should be a part of an exception, that there is an understanding that this kid is using it for something very specific?
Well, that's a decision I will leave to the people that make those decisions. In the training, they are taught different ways of accessing the system. They are taught you can call, you can text, or you can get online and report a tip. So they know how to. That's part of the training. What are the various ways that they can report a tip? So they do have that.
And our policy does give that latitude in emergency situations for the students to use their devices. So, I will say, I'll add to the Say Something. This legislation has been in place since about 2016 or 2017. This particular program, the state actually pays for it. And so a district is free to go out and use another service or app if they want, but it must comply with the law. And so the previous program that we're using did not completely comply with the law. And so that's where we made the switch to the See Something, Say Something. When you talk about, I guess, the effort that it takes at the school, that was, I think, the biggest concern that schools had. But that's some of the reassurance that we gave that when this program comes online and kids begin to use it, then you're not going to see those high numbers that a team has to deal with. And so I specifically remember Michelle and I had a meeting about this with the division principals and assistant principals. And so there was this question about this. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I just got to tell you, this legislation has been in place since 2016 to 2017. So what have we been doing in the meantime? And so we had a process, but it didn't comply with the law. And so now we're in full compliance. And what we hear is that it has not created the impact in terms of extra work that they thought it would. So we're glad to see that happen.
And we're seeing kids report. I mean, the good thing is we are able to intervene early. Schools are actually very pleased.
Yeah.
Counseling staff's very pleased because they're like, I can know when there's a concern on Friday night if I need to know, before, and I'm prepared to do what I need to do Monday morning, whatever is necessary. So that is, we've got some really good outcomes as a result of
And
that.
I would encourage us to do the extension to 4th and 5th grade. It makes a lot of
And what I
sense.
try to tell people that really, the anonymous reporting is just another source of information.
Right.
Right? It's as though somebody walked into your office. It's just different. So it's a different source of information, and I think having them understand that and seeing that it was not as burdensome as they thought it would be, and the fact that our students are using it. We have adults that use it, by the way, as well. So anybody that lives in Wayne County, or actually anywhere in the world, really, because it's a nationwide thing, can use it. So we've had situations where, some things have been reported, by adults or a concerned parent or something.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. We all know that when our students are well mentally, they want to come to school, which is going to impact absenteeism drastically. I did have a couple of questions around like the stakeholder engagement. When you talk about parents serving on collaboratives and committees, can you say more about those collaborative efforts with parents?
Sure. So we have a couple of committees. One is the Mental Health Services Collaborative. We actually are meeting this Thursday. And we talk about some of the issues that we're seeing, ways to address them, resources in the community. So on that collaborative, it's members of the school system, but then we have some of our community partners that are present, parents, and we have a good discussion about what each person brings to the table and what we see in the district needs to be addressed and how we might do that. So we have a contract now with NAMI of Wake County, who's doing some presentations in schools about just, again, mental health education to parents at this point, like at a PTA night. And part of that came to fruition because of the conversations through our mental health collaborative. And then we also have our school-based mental health program, and we have a committee, and on that we also have a parent. So part of operating all of our services and getting them in place, we want parent input into that too. So we make sure that they have a seat at the table, we have their voices lifted up.
Okay, and a follow-up to that question, you mentioned the school-based mental health partners. What are we doing to maintain like accountability and communication with these partners? Are the parent collaboratives like meeting with them, district staff? Like, what does that look like?
We have a school-based mental health coordinator, Brittany Bass. She is one person in our department who is, it was going swimmingly while we had maybe 40 schools on site, but now that we're going into all schools, Ms. Whitson and I have been talking about there's going to be a need to expand some of the infrastructure to be able to maintain that oversight, because it's not just let's set it up and let it go.
Right.
Most of the time it does go well, but there's always things we have to troubleshoot and maintain and manage. For example, some of the vendors, if they are on certain insurance panels, we're missing some students at that school, so we might have to put another vendor in there. So some schools have 2 vendors, so we can try to meet all the students' needs, and if they have insurance, don't have insurance, they have Medicaid. And so all of that takes planning. We have to make sure that they turn in a weekly report so we know how many students they're seeing. We review every single referral to make sure we have the proper consents. The guardianship is what it is, proper forms have been signed. All of that, maintaining that takes time, and one person is doing that right now. So there's going to be some discussions about how we can improve that as we grow. Right? It's a good thing, but we need to strengthen that part.
Yeah, we're trying to do a department-wide maintenance of effort to just kind of say how much is coming at people, right? And what do we need to do, maybe to share the wealth? If we've got some people that aren't, who's got too much, and what does that look like so that we can make some good decisions as we go forward? We don't want any individual to be overwhelmed. We also want to make sure the work's moving forward, so we'll continue that work.
And to Board Member Hershey's question about the loss of funds, while most of it was going to go towards therapists, we did have some central services positions that were going to assist with that, and so we did lose that. The funding did take a hit with the central office functioning of managing the program.
And then one more question. The data that you're presenting on the SEL components, it's my understanding that based off of what's here, this data was collected from the BIMAS?
BIMAS? Mhm.
BIMAS. Can you tell me what the acronym is?
I'm happy to. Corliss can take it as well. It's our universal screener for student wellness, effectively their social emotional learning levels. The ultimate implementation of VIMUS, which we are hoping to move forward with, will have 3 components and not just one. Currently, we will, at the end of this year, have all schools in with the one component, which is kind of a teacher evaluation. But our goal is that we want parents and students. It's a 3-pronged survey so that we look at 3 data points to see where we're going to be. So our goal is to make sure, and actually we will be moving forward with the parent component next so that they can provide input, and then we'll be able to continue on from there.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, so it is
hearing my
data,
question.
and it's good data, but you're right, it will be stronger data when we have all 3 components for sure to be looking at.
Because,
those.
we want to make sure that our data, I know that it tells a story, but it also should drive change.
100%.
And this is glowing data. And so I just want to make sure that we are staying true to having all stakeholders involved and making sure that
Correct.
we can meet the needs of students mentally. Thank you.
So I think a lot of my questions have been raised, but I do think this is very important to bring this and highlight this during this month, given that this is Suicide Awareness Month. And so with that being said, and the stuff and the work that's been displayed, are we allowing students to be ambassadors for this? Because oftentimes students can shift the narrative and brand this and encourage their peers much better than adults. So how are we leveraging their voices to really own this and help shape the culture that they would like to see?
So that's part of why we created the Youth Mental Health Advisory Group, and we're just getting ready to select a new group of incoming students into high school. So some of them will remain on that group. We had 1 representative from each high school. This year, we're asking for 2 representatives from each high school, and we're also encouraging the schools to select freshmen and sophomores. We had some wonderful seniors, but after you have a year of them and then they graduate, we lose that input. We still want to have seniors, but we want to have a variety of high school students on it, and we want to double the participation to do exactly what you said. They can go back to their schools and serve as an ambassador. And then, of course, what they bring us is always valuable. We learn so much from them. So that's where that program it started a couple years ago. We're going to continue to expand on that.
They actually, in the last couple of years, have created posters that we've printed and put in every one of our schools, and the kids created it about how can you assess how somebody's doing today, right? What does that look like, and what's going well, what's not going well? We shared it. I was just saying we needed the other slide deck. We shared with Dr. Ng at his VAC meeting last night that some of those examples of those posters.
And I think to that, I know our website is being redesigned and rebranded, so I'm hoping that this could be a way that we can put this front and center so students can see it, families can see it. So again, to Ms. Rice's point earlier, we're saving students' lives, we're saving people's lives. My other question I had regarding the committees, I know Ms. Gordon, lifted this up, but I would also encourage us to kind of think through how do we bring municipality leaders into this? Because oftentimes, those are folks, those are leaders that are also have their, I guess, ear to the streets or whatnot. So if we're all speaking from the same language and, bringing them in, it can help us move this work and, see better results. And so my final question, just looking at the data from the data from the self-awareness or the self-management and social awareness, what mechanisms are being used to determine what growth looks like for the folks that are looking or just curious?
Clarify the
So
question.
I'm looking at seeing it from the elementary level from 2000, this is the social awareness one, for example. It went from 81% to 83%, middle school 72 to 78. So just trying to, flesh out a little bit more of how are we assessing what this growth looks like? What are the components that goes into this to indicate if we're growing or not necessarily growing, but in this case, we're seeing that the data is going up. So just kind of pulling out that data a little bit more.
And that's within the system itself. So BIMAS is a survey, right? So at this point, it's just teacher input. So you're really just looking at what was the input previous year and comparing that. So that is what you're doing because it allows you to do that over time to see what the growth is. Beyond that, no, we're not doing anything like specifically with the students or anything if that's what you're talking about. But it's really the results of the survey and assessing what the growth has been based on the re-administration of the survey district.
And I think it's, I kind of picked up our former colleague, Ms. Johnson-Hostler's piece about school improvement plans. Is this data or key parts out of this being lifted up and implemented in school improvement plans, so therefore we're 100% in line at all 203, 204 schools?
We are absolutely talking about that with the area superintendents and their senior administrators because they help monitor that school improvement structure, and they are very aware of the work that we're doing with this and how important it is for us to know where risk is. We are also launching, even moving a little bit forward, to talk about how student support services teams within each school can look at their own school's data, right? This is where we were, this is where we are to this year. This may not have gone as well. What do we see as what could be possible reasons as to why that didn't go well, and what do we need to do even internally in our school to support what might be able to provide some better outcomes?
And then, I guess I would say this is my final, but it's no time I can start saying final, because clearly I can't count today, or it's all the coffee I've had. But I know we can't control what happens at certain levels of government, but are we concerned about the cuts that happen with Medicaid and other things that are going to start going into effect? Do we see that as a way that could dampen a lot of this work, especially with the partners that are here that's using, that may rely on that? So is there anything we can speak to that?
I mean, I think the one thing that we can do is to continue to have these kinds of conversations to show the work that we're doing, but also show the impact of what budget cuts have. And so when we talk about our mental health grant, there were specific things that we were going to do, and now we can't do that. You see how we've had to reduce what it is we were able to implement. But we also recognize that much of mental health at the local and state level is also supported tremendously by federal grants. And so we get asked the question all the time, will you guys be able to depend on local and state government to backfill? And our answer is always no, because we're all in the same boat to where that federal funding is being pulled back. And so, this presentation today absolutely helps the public to understand how very important this work is. More than anything, I was going to say this at the end, but I'll say it now since I got the floor. But I appreciate the questions that you all have asked, because it brings light to not only what we're doing, but why this kind of work is important to impact student learning. We've all said that if students have these barriers, then they can't learn. And we want everybody to understand that while this is not our responsibility as educators, we know we have to take it on, because everybody in the community does not have the same resources to impact their children like we can. They come to us every day, they spend more time with us than they do their parents. But We need the mental health professionals because teachers are hired to teach. I'll go back to what you said, Ms. Rice. It is about not only having the mental health professionals that can do this work, but making sure that everybody that have contact with children know and understand what they can do in their portion of being able to impact this. And so it's not that we look for teachers to be mental health professionals, but we expect them to be able to identify, share, intervene at the levels that they've been trained to do so. And so this is where we want people to understand that this requires a community effort. And while they look at schools, if a child has a mental health issue, it's not a school issue. It's a child issue. But we have them during the school day. What about when they're at church? What about when they're on the playground? What about when they're at the football game watching the Carolina Panthers play?
That's depressing, but anyway.
They can become Rams fans. But this is, what's important about this work, that we can bring attention to a problem that is not a school problem. It is a community problem. But we're going to do well more than what we're supposed to do to try to impact. So we appreciate it.
And I think, as we're centering our students, which is also very important, I don't want us to neglect our teachers, our educators, our school-based leaders, because their mental health is just as important. And so I'm hoping that as we're developing this, we're able to also set aside and carve out things to support our teachers and staff. So I know there was a district that allowed teachers to have therapy sessions during planning before, after school. I won't mention that district because I don't need, their funding or whatnot to get impacted by this. But hopefully that's something that we can model with some of the partners that we have here at the table. So are there any questions or last minute remarks?
I just want to say one last thing to add on to Mr. Hershey when he asked the question, the why. Why is this important? And I just want to leave these, since we're talking about data, these last data points of why this mental health is important and why it's important that not only, I say it every Tuesday, right, about our staff's mental health and our students' mental health. Because every 11 seconds, someone completes suicide. Every 11 seconds, someone completes suicide. And then here is the kicker for everybody that I need everyone to hear through our media and everything. The leading cause of suicide in the state of North Carolina for children ages 10 to 24, the leading cause of death is suicide. The leading cause of death of our children that we serve K through 12 in North Carolina, not the country, in North Carolina, is suicide. That's why we do this work. That's why it's important, because if your children are dying, how are you going to teach them? If your staff is so stressed with their own home lives and no real tools to regulate themselves, how are they going to teach? So that's why we do this work and why it's important that the amazing Peshes and Woodsons of the world and the great Dr. Corliss Thompson is doing the work that we're doing, led by Dr. Hill, so that our students can be safe. If we cover Maslow hierarchy of needs, just the basics, we can do the rest. So thank you all for all that you do.
So it looks like we will turn to our next topic, which is ensuring student well-being, seclusion,
There you go. Whatever works for you. Whatever works for you.
We will give them time to pull the presentation, but we'll welcome
I'm good, thank you.
I got my drink in there. Thank you, appreciate that. Got time. Which one? She's always taking care of us, you know that, right? She's always taking care of us.
So we will welcome Dr. Walker and Ms. Allred. And Ms. So Dr. Woodson, I'll kick over to you to kick us off.
Good afternoon again. Glad to see you all again. I'm going to start, but this is really a collaboration between the Student Support Services Department and Special Education Services. I'm super excited to be with you today with Lisa Allred and Dr. Paul Walker. And we are going to talk a little bit more about seclusion and restraint. So today, thank you so much, no worries. We're going to make sure that we can really communicate again. We've done this before, but we really want to make sure we do this again, clearly communicate about the state and federal reporting requirements because they are different between those two. For seclusion and restraint, we want to make sure we can provide those clear definitions. We want to review the 24-25 July through June seclusion and restraint data, highlighting key trends and areas of improvement, and we'll discuss some implications for student well-being and staff training. And then we want to outline the steps for the 25-26 school year that's really going to focus on reducing those incidents of seclusion and restraint and enhancing professional learning and really communication with families across the board. So all of this work, again, highly aligned to student well-being, thinking about priority 2, really focusing on behavioral health, looking at the fact that we want to make sure we have a safe and inclusive learning environment, that we also eliminate overrepresentation by race, ethnicity, gender, and disability in our student discipline referrals, and we'll talk a little bit about that specifically, and that we're also making sure we're building those relationships with families as we're talking about this data and how we want to respond to this data as well. So I just wanted to reference back to this behavioral health framework. We've been talking about this for a couple of years now, but this is such an important thing to think about as we want to talk about what does core behavior look like in every classroom. 3 of these items we want to say that we want every kid to have access to every day, and really the other 2 are also embedded within it. But we want students to be able to know and understand what their classroom expectations are. What is it? The expectations that of me in a classroom for whichever classroom I might be in the course of the day. We want to make sure every student is explicitly taught the school-wide expectations and that they have access to that social emotional learning that is really about the importance of making sure that they know peer-to-peer relationships, they know how to set goals, they also know how to ensure that they are able to regulate themselves, deal with anxiety, and all of that needs to happen inside of a trauma-informed and restorative framework, really focusing on the fact that we want those restorative practices at the core of our interactions with students. And then, of course, if students are struggling with behavior, they would go into a tiered response. So if I'm not doing well at my core level, then I get something in addition to help support me. Mr. Pesh referenced something like check-in, check-out. We've talked about that before as well. If I need something extra or something even further beyond that with an intensive model. So I am going to turn this over to Dr. Walker at this point to talk about the data.
Good, great. Thank you, Ms. Woodson, and hello, board members. We really, in the sense of what Ms. Woodson said, really covers the need to take care of our kids. And also, of course, what we just discussed with Michael Pesh about mental health, right? So where does seclusion and restraint practices fit into that? And as Ms. Woodson said, I'll cover some of the particular data. So how do we foster a positive classroom? How do we make sure parents are notified when something like this happens of a seclusion and restraint? So who are the students now? And so, we approximately have about 160,000 students. And so for last year, for 24-25, it included, and that's not incidents, that's the number of students, so 544 students experience either a seclusion or restraint. So it's less than 1% of our student body. We're going to, of course, go over more of the data and the definitions, but I want to just say off the bat, because when I do this, I'm not only talking to you as the board, but also parents and our community members, that seclusion and restraint, they're never really to be disciplinary measures. And so when we're thinking about the well-being of students, it's something where we have to be very clear on when we're choosing to seclude and or restrain. And so when looking at the effective reporting about it and then intervention, and this is something that some of you said before, and we have to really highlight the need to do the incident reporting. And so that begins with our staff. Staff has to be very clear on when an incident occurs, they report it directly to the electronic database, which currently, it used to be ECATS, right, the Every Child Accountability Tracking System. Now it's Infinite Campus, and that's a statewide system. So we are all using Infinite Campus to report this. And we're going to get to the reporting in the system, right? That's the formality, really, but how we clarify to parents here. There's an internal review, and that's where key members of my team is here that really support this work and review it every day to make sure that it is accurate, because as Ms. Woodson said, and as we'll look at, the definitions are different, right, for federal and state. So we got to clarify and document what we see and what comes to us. NCDPI, right, we have to report this to the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and they, on our behalf, report it to the federal government, the criteria. And so it's continual compliance and monitoring. So you see this process review, we got to understand and interrupt, and that's how we use this data. So really key here. So next three is really the definitions, and this is important again for newer parents or parents that want a refresher of what are the difference here. So we have previously shared these definitions. So in order to understand the data, you have to understand the distinction here. And it comes down to a simple yet important difference of what may trigger a particular report. So let's look at this federal category. When it comes to restraint, it's broad, right? You see, it requires us to report any incident, anytime it happens, kind of regardless of the outcome. Right? I have a daughter in our system, and I would want to know if any time that my daughter is restrained, right? She's not able to move her torso, arms, legs, head freely. The federal government says, hey, we want to know that. Not about escorts, right? It's a slight nuance there that they're not concerned about, but that is the key thing for federal. When it comes to the state, the definitions are really the same. Main thing is the state said, we know you're going to catch it in federal. We got that. State says, we want to know if there's some type of injury sustained. And so it has to be some observable physical injury. So that is restraint, physical restraint. So then, of course, mechanical. Yeah, definitions are primarily the same. Federal says very general. Remember, if there is any device or equipment to restrict a student's freedom of movement. The state says more particularly, right, tying, taping, strapping down, all those things. You have to report any of those things, the state says. So that's the definition of just mechanical restraint. Seclusion, I'm going to go over that, and then I'm going to go over some nuances more about seclusion. So seclusion, again, tying into the well-being of our kids, and teachers helping support and staff helping support kids. Any parent would want to know when their child is alone, right, secluded alone in a room, and they're prevented from leaving. That's what has to be communicated. So as you see, again, the federal and state definitions are practically the same. Federal overall, anytime it's an involuntary confinement, and they're prevented from leaving physically, the federal government wants to know that. We have to tell them. And the state, of course, has the same definition. Now, again, they know the federal is going to catch all of them. They want to know, hey, if it exceeds 10 minutes, we want you to report that. And also, there's some clarity about if a student has an individual education program or a Section 504 plan for the state. So, when it comes to the state seclusion reporting, you're going to see, when we look at the data, again, federal, and we're going to say state. So I want you to know that, as you see, we're very key on making sure that all of our data is transparent. And so there's a distinction that I want to make sure to clarify when it comes to state seclusion. So here's the distinction. You see it up there. I'm just going to put it in my parent-friendly terms here, is that NCDPI requires us to report any seclusion that exceeds 10 minutes or goes beyond what's written in the student's IEP. That's what the state wants us to do. Even if the seclusion is legally permissible under a student's plan, if it goes past the 10-minute threshold, we have to report it as illegal per DPI system. The difference is state statute doesn't necessarily say that. And so it does not say a seclusion becomes illegal just for going over 10 minutes. However, that's how DPI wants us to report it. So while we may label the state, and it's the state labeling it as illegal in our reporting system to meet the requirements, we're, again, just being very transparent about this aspect. We want you to know that this is a reporting requirement, not a legal violation when it comes to our particular data. Our goal is to ensure that our reporting is accurate, compliant, completely understood by everyone here. So when looking at the particular data, so this is comparison here. So this is the past 3 years, and remember, we have created a far more robust, strategic way of reporting this data. And so how to read this data. So let's start with physical restraint. You see 1309 last year, and you see the distinction between what happened in previous years. And you know what that is as compared to, again, the state. You see the state is quite low, 1309, 10, right? And you know why, right? 10 has to have that observable injury here. The federal does not. Let me use the example of seclusion to clarify these numbers here. So seclusion. So last year, here's the statement that I want parents to know, and you, the board, and staff. There were 447 incidents of seclusion. Not 447 plus 301. The 301 is embedded in the 447. All right? So that's a really key distinction when it comes to, remember, how we have to report to the state about seclusion and restraint in these particular numbers. And so same thing when you look at physical restraint, you wouldn't say 1309 plus 10, right? It's embedded in that. So we are definitely reporting all that we need to report. So we break this down over the next few slides. We just break this down just even more so. And oftentimes I may get from the board, you know, can you do this with that? Can you do? Yes, we have the data, and we need the data to inform decisions. And so this is just a snapshot of just overall some of the things we wanted to highlight. So we have 544 students, right? Remember that? So now to put in perspective, our total student population, of course, remember, is 160,000. So let's look at this. This is by school level. And you see the majority, right? What do you kind of take from this? The majority was elementary, right? So it tells us that these incidents occur most often with our youngest adults that are reported. And then we look at gender, right? Majority are male, right? And then we also see here, okay, by level, by race here, and finally we look at it by race. And that is something we're just going to continue to do, is disaggregate the data by race, right? Because then we're able to determine the need. And we see here there's a disproportionately high number of students involved in seclusion and restraint that are black students. And so we recognize this as a critical data point here. So drilling down a little bit more, so we have this subgroup where we talk about IEP status. So when we dive into this, we want to look at these students by this subgroup. And of course, Lisa Allred will talk more about special education as a whole with this. But I just wanted to highlight this piece of data here is out of the 544 students involved in incidents of seclusion or restraint, roughly about 400 of them were exceptional children. So that may be roughly about 73% may have an IEP. And of course, we take it by level here, right? And so, last one here, more about subgroups. So we drill more down in elementary. So what happens in elementary? Just by race, we see that black students account for more than about 50% of all students involved in these incidents. Middle school and high school, we see those same trends. And when it comes to gender, our data shows that male students, right, as we talked about, are disproportionately involved in these particular incidents. And so now it's what does the definitions and when looking at the students and what is the response as we work through this here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Ms. Allred. Thanks. You're welcome.
So let's talk about continuing the work. I want to talk to you a little bit about the creation of our district team and what we're doing to support, and then how we're using specialized staff to support some of these students that have major issues of dysregulation or behavior, and then the implementation, continuation of training that we're doing, and then finally our ongoing collaboration. So we have communication and proper use of identified spaces. We surveyed principals, asked them if they had a seclusion room, and then our staff went out and looked at these seclusion rooms to check, to make sure did they meet compliance with what we expected, which were things like, is the room appropriately lighted? Is it ventilated for heating and cooling? The student must be able to be seen while they're in the room and heard, not just seen, but heard literally, and it was by senior leadership team along some of our central service people that went out to these schools. We went into the rooms, we shut the door, we really went through a list of things to make sure these rooms were safe for our kids. The space has to be free of objects so the student can't hurt themselves in any way while they're in there. Additionally, what we found through looking at this and the data is that sometimes it was reported as a seclusion room. We got out there, and it had been in the past, but was not currently. And so we gave the schools some feedback about, now, if you're going to use this as a seclusion room, you need to do this, and this, should they have a child that they needed to seclude. Also, they called it a seclusion room, but we went out and asked questions, and they were using it with students, but the student was never left alone. They weren't prevented from leaving, so to the definition that Paul gave you, all that doesn't rise to seclusion. So they weren't really using it like a seclusion room. We have some additional information that some of the schools are using calming spaces, and so our next step is to go out and look at those calming spaces to look at their condition and make sure that, to be able to just tell a school, should you need to, if you did this, and this, it could be used as a seclusion room. But we want to be very careful about what we call things. If we're calling it a seclusion room, it needs to be free of all those things that I was telling you, and we're only using it if it's in a child's IEP. So we want to be really careful. So we're trying to be clear with our language as we speak to schools, and we're asking them to be clear with their language, especially as they speak to our parents, so the parent really knows what's going on. So based on our review of the data of the use of seclusion and restraint, we're targeting some of the schools to provide additional support. We're reviewing functional behavior assessments and behavior intervention plans. We're having data discussions with some of the schools. We're doing some additional de-escalation training, observing and coaching. So some of the ways that we are trying to support students that have extreme issues with de-escalation, we collaborate closely with the Autism Society of North Carolina. They provide coaching, modeling. They're developing some PD that we'll talk about in just a minute. They're also supervising registered behavior technicians, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. The Autism Society of North Carolina has several board-certified behavior analysts. You'll hear us call those BCBAs, and they support our students in several ways, including those. Additionally, we are in the process of working with HR to hire some board-certified analysts on our team to support some of these schools that are having children that are having some extreme behaviors, dysregulation. And we've contracted with a company. Currently, we have 3 registered behavior technicians that are working with some of our most challenging students. They're in there observing, intervening, with our goal being that they would help set that team up for success and then fade out so that we could use them in other cases where we have children with extreme behavior. Again, related to continuing education and professional development, the schools that are we're going to target, we are working to get a DPI de-escalation course available to us so that we can ask those schools to go through this de-escalation training this year to provide them with some additional tools to use in their schools to help with these students who have extreme behaviors. We're working to roll out an enhanced FBA BIP training to those schools. And ASNAP, Autism Society of North Carolina, has created some online courses for us. Additionally, they've identified some model schools where we've got maybe elementary behavior support teachers working really well with children, using some of those best practices to prevent this from happening. And we're going to try to capture those on video so our teachers can see our teachers and our students being successful and be able to use some of those strategies themselves. We continue to train CPI. We also have our own de-escalation training. So as the schools that we've targeted, we're going to continue to look at the data in those schools and hopefully see that data come down. If it does not, we're going to layer on some additional training. Like our team will go out and do some de-escalation training to try to help them gain some strategies to better support the students. And then finally, our regional model that we're working towards, our goal is to be proactive. What are we going to do to give these students the skills that they need to regulate, back to what you all were talking about with mental health, so they don't get to these extreme behaviors and we have to use either restraint or seclusion. And then finally, I want to make sure you all hear from us and that our parents hear that seclusion and restraint is always our last resort. Dr. Walker spoke to that earlier. I just want to reiterate that. And we are only using it when children are not safe or adults are not safe. They're a harm to themselves or others. And that is our last resort to use seclusion and restraint. We are in the process of finalizing the updates to our elementary behavior support manual. That manual goes online on our website. Every parent of a student that is in our elementary behavior support classes gets a copy of this annually. We ask them to sign off that they've read it and understand it. And again, it's on our webpage. And then we don't do this work, I'm talking special ed services, in isolation. Our climate teams, student due process, social workers, counselors, psychologists are critical team members for us in special ed to make sure that we are wrapping our arms around these children, wrapping those services around children, so that we can use our best efforts, including restorative justice, restorative practices, and mental health supports to get these kiddos what they need. Our partners that Michael talked about earlier with Alliance are critical in getting those supports to students and families ahead as early as we can. to help them get the resources they need. And those agencies that we partner with, like Alliance and Autism Society in North Carolina, are critical. And then finally, I'll speak specifically about Autism Society and the work that they're doing with us. They've been working with us for a long time. We have a really great relationship with them, and they really help us hone in on the supports that, specifically the area of autism, where children have language-based disabilities, and really we have to address them a little differently to meet their unique needs. And with that, what questions do you have?
Thank you for providing us with these updates and laying things out for us. So I'll just go around the table to see if there's questions. I'll start with Ms. Gordon.
Thank you for this, all this information. I had lots of questions before coming to the table, but a lot of them were answered. However, you mentioned calming stations. Are calming stations required for all schools or classrooms? And have our staff and educators been like trained on how to effectively use them?
They're not required. Schools make decisions about calming rooms, calming stations. Now, I would say if there's a child that a team has determined needs a calming space, then they need to create it, because if they say a child needs it, they've got to create it and provide it. So that's typically how that happens, is a team comes to the understanding. A lot of our ECS and EBS classrooms have calming spaces. It might be a beanbag in a corner with some fidgets and things that can help de-escalate and help them continue to regulate their feelings and get back into regulation. So no, they're not required unless they're in an IEP, and then they are required. And again, if they're required in IEP, you can't say this is what a calming room is, because the I in IEP is individualized. So you have to make sure that whatever's required, that you all have determined. And a lot of times, we get that really good information from those BCBAs. They really dig into that behavior and figure out, is it sensory, whatever. And if it's sensory, an OT might come in and say, this is what they need to calm, and then that calming area needs to have whatever elements are needed for that student. I hope that answered the question.
Can I add to, I can say that as we're talking about school climate over and over and over again, as we're just talking, and I'm just talking about a regular education classroom, and walked a building just a little while ago, that this particular principal has got a calming space in every single classroom and every single across the building, right? We are all recognizing that all of us need a moment sometimes.
I need one in my office sometimes.
And that is, and there does need to be an opportunity, not only in a special education classroom, but we all might need to think about what this might look like. I also walked with, in a middle school recently, where the team member, so a middle school might be, the ELA, Math, Science, and Social Studies team has one of those classrooms has a space that a student can go to if you're on that team, and I'm just not doing all right for a minute, there's a place for me to go. So we are talking that as we're talking about classroom environment in the regular ed classroom. That is different from what Lisa's saying, because we have to be specific to that individual, right, in a special education classroom. But just wanted to say we're also talking about that as well, because we all need a minute every once in a while.
I would love to see that. I would love to see the district take a more proactive approach in that, as it relates to supporting students and even staff.
Correct. We all need a place to go every once in a while.
And then I did want to ask about the de-escalation trainings. You mentioned that we are trying to get the DPI.
So I pulled it down. I can't interact with it. I'm working with the Office of Professional Learning to get it into our Learning Central course so that schools can what is my word? All of a sudden, they can access it. And then at that point, I'll reach out to those schools and say, the training is here. We need you to do this. And my goal is for them to have it done by December.
What's the difference between the DPI training and the training that we offer?
So I have not been able to see the DPI training yet because I can't get into it. Our training has been developed by some of our behavior specialists based on the information that they know through CPI, because CPI You know, we talk about CPI as a restraint training, but probably 2/3 of that training is de-escalation. Most of that training is how to de-escalate the situation, and just the last little bit is about if you have to put hands on a child, here's the safe way to do it. And so our staff has taken what they've learned through CPI training and developed a de-escalation training that would layer on top of the DPI training. But I can't tell you the difference yet.
And I just have one follow-up thing to say about, in regard to the de-escalation training. Have we thought about, there are so many educators in our district who are leading in the area of just relationship, like basic relationship building. Is that something that we can explore by putting some of these leaders in positions to kind of share what they're doing to help others in the district?
I love
Again,
that.
speaking about being proactive, is that something that we can explore?
You and I are thinking very much the same, yes. The fact that I've even been to some of these particular schools is we want those principals to highlight their strategies, what's working, because their data looks good as well. Obviously, there's relationship happening in those classrooms every day, and it's important. And that's there's no better teacher or learner is as a peer to a peer, right? When my colleague is helping me see how it works in their building and I can learn and go watch it and see it, that's a powerful opportunity. We'll be doing learning walks in October, as a matter of fact, to talk about some of those things.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't want to lose the point that Ms. Gordon was raising about the de-escalation training. I'm hoping that they will just be not, hope it's not a requirement just for special education teachers, that it's every person in the room or in the building, because although I was a special education teacher, my students do not just come to me as a teacher, they come to Ms. Gordon or Ms. Rice or Mr. Hershey, making sure that those teachers understand that they can trigger students, and we don't want that to happen. So just not putting additional pressures or stresses on special education educators, but it's everyone in the building
100%.
has to be on that piece. Being a former special education educator, I know how at the beginning of the school year, there's a lot that's already put on special education teachers. I don't want this to be viewed upon that this is an additional add-on when it's everyone in the building is responsible for that. Mr. Hershey?
Oh, sure. It's not the most important thing, but you brought up DPI and the term illegal. Have they justified to school districts why they do that? Or why we have to follow that?
In the sense of the DPI reporting?
Yeah, if it doesn't match state law, how are they justifying that requirement?
Right. Yeah, and we're working with our legal team to help clarify that more with DPI, and we have raised that question, and so in order for us to make sure that we are obedient to what they're asking, they said report it as they wanted, and we'll continue the conversation if we need to shift in the future here.
So I'm just thinking, if something is illegal by state law and has a very specific definition, and they're saying, well, don't worry about state law, we want you to do it this way, I think that's problematic.
You heard it right.
Is the way I understand it as a board member.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
I'm going to ask like 4 questions all at once so you can answer them. You mentioned some schools having seclusion rooms versus some schools having the non-seclusion rooms. How many for each? What's the expectations for schools for having a seclusion room? Is it required? Is it a recommendation from staff? How does one get to that place for a school?
Again, if it's for special ed, it's always for special ed. It's because you have a student that requires that and it's in their IEP. Again, it's a last resort. In our investigation, we found 11 seclusion rooms, and we were able to say, these are approved seclusion rooms. Again, we only allow those to be used when it's in a child's IEP and they meet the parameters. So our oversight was really just to make sure, what are you calling it? Is it really one, and how are you using it? Just for us to make sure that it was being used appropriately. There's not a requirement to have one unless you have a child that needs one.
And so a school could have one year and not have one the next year?
Correct, and that's why there were some places that said, oh, we have one. We got out there, they were using it for storage, basically, and we were like, what? And they were like, well, we don't have so-and-so anymore, so we don't need one. And so it really wasn't, so in our definition, that's not a seclusion room, because they're not using it that way.
Sure.
But because it once was, they reported that they had one.
Yeah.
And if that room that was a storage unit or a storage room, et cetera, if that person or if that school has to then create another seclusion room, does it have to be approved by your office first before they can go back to that
So
seclusion?
what we said in those cases was, no one needs it right now, this is not a seclusion room. If you want it to be a seclusion room, you must do clean out, make sure that, you know, and then we would come back and check again. Our intent is that we do this on a regular basis, that we survey principals and make sure that we have a pulse on where they are and do they meet the parameters that we've given.
Can I follow up on yours?
Sure.
Because I was thinking he was asking, like, once they make it into a seclusion room too, do you check off before it's used?
If we know it.
Well, I mean, okay, so where's the...
We do
why
not
wouldn't
currently
you
have a
know?
mechanism to know, because, so you're talking about 22,000 IEPs,
Right.
and we don't have a mechanism where they have to report to us, we've now put a seclusion room in a classroom.
So can we get to that place?
We
Because
can
I think-
certainly put something in place
I
about
think
that.
the problem could be. We have 203 schools.
Right.
And principals are mayors of their building, town managers, however they want to view themselves. To be consistent, I think there should be some process that allows your office to be notified, to check off, and then there's levels of accountability versus a principal saying, I didn't know, but then a SPED teacher or a department chair knows. When those lawsuits come, they don't necessarily mention the teachers, it's the Board of Education. And so if we're going to be sued, we need to make sure that, number one, we're holding folks accountable and know. So therefore, there is some consistency, and it shifts the culture and the tone that this is not acceptable.
We can certainly put some alerts in place.
Well, I'm wondering, and maybe this is for my colleagues here and the superintendent, is should that be a part of policy that we have? Because, I mean, it's pretty standard. You can catch them up real quick. Because to me, it's pretty standard. Like, you open a new
That they would
school,
notify
it's
us
gotta get
before they
checked
created
off
one.
Before it can be used safely. So this, to me, strikes me as a room that should be checked off, given what we see.
And the IEP team is a team. It just can't necessarily be one person that
100%.
talks about this. It has to be consensus amongst the team. And if a family objects to it, there's no way that the conversation can continue because that IEP is a team process. And so families and parents do have a say-so in these IEPs and what that looks like. And so I just hope that that's not getting lost and that folks around the table, especially families, understand when it comes to that individualized education plan, they are their best advocate for their child as relates to that IEP.
As Mr. Shaw would say, it doesn't necessarily need to be in the policy, but we can certainly have a procedure that says if you have a seclusion and restraint room, then the district needs to be notified so they can come out and certify that it meets the standard.
100%.
But yeah, we can still do that.
I think there's some discussion.
No, I think it's open to discussion too for that, but we can do that at a
My turn?
policy meeting.
Yeah, I like that. Just to keep it where we're at, I respect our superintendent's thought about policy and procedure, but sometimes, as Vice Chair Swanson said, we have 204 schools and 204 mayors. And so sometimes mayors see these procedures as optional, and it is the board's desire to see that it is not an option, that it is something that we create that's uniform across the district. And sometimes procedural things work well, but sometimes people have a different view of what they want their procedures to be at their school. Since they say it's their school, we see all schools as our schools collectively. And so I am one to push that it needs to be brought to a policy in reference to that, only because it happens to these 544 students out of these 160,000. I paid attention to that slide 5. That's less than 1% of our school population. And so for me, I want to be able to say thank you to you all at the end of this table that's raising concern about these 544 children, that they matter too. Their school environment matters, and what we do around this table is to protect them as well, and to prepare our regular education teachers to handle and to support these 544 students. I think there was some clarification for me about the calming room versus the seclusion room. I think I need to just a little bit more. When I go visit schools, I ask, is there a calming room? Didn't know that you all call your calming room. Possibly some people may think it's one and the same thing, but it's not. But I too had the same thing about that calming room. What does that look like in our school system of having that in every school for everyone, both child and adult? So Ms. Gordon and I are definitely on the same page as that. That's something that I ask about, so I want to be clear when I go visit the rest of my schools, when I'm asking to see, and I just ask at random, do you guys have calming rooms? And in my mind, I was thinking mental health wise for students who just need a minute, no matter what's going on. But I think you're sharing with me is that asking about a calming room and the perspective that I'm saying is not at every school. It is an optional piece. But the seclusion room is an optional piece, but it has to have certain components in it in order to be identified as one. Is that correct?
Seclusion rooms must meet those parameters.
Okay.
Calming spaces they don't have parameters that they have to meet, and they're typically based on whatever for my house, for whatever the children need that is called for in their IEP.
Okay, because I saw some of the room spaces, and they're very nice. They've got where children can color on a poster and stuff to do things that will calm them. I think it's fantastic. I think it's necessary considering the data that we just shared. We just don't know when people need a moment, as well as our staff. So I think that's it. I'm not going to go too far. I think I'm going to stop right there, Board Member Swanson, because I think most of it's been answered. I just wanted to define more about the calming room versus the seclusion and where we're going with that, and how, hopefully, too, you've got 2 out of, how many we votes need now? 2 out of 6.
For which one?
The calming spaces in every
3.
school to help us. That's if the schools are built to even have the space to do it. I would love to see it.
So I wanted to lift up a piece out of the 544 incidents. How many of those incidents were related to physical fights? And the physical fights are, how are they counted amongst that number?
Yeah, and just want to segue to my team. Overall, do we know or do we about how many are attributed to fights?
Yeah, we'd have to take a look at that.
Yeah, just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Had the folks in the room here. So, yeah, not sure exactly.
So I would love when we bring this back to identify that, because when the public looks at this, we want to be able to carve out and say, okay, out of the 1% of the 544 examples, this is related to seclusion for students as relates to special education, and this number is dedicated to how many physical fights may have been into the building. So therefore, it's a clear separation of the two, so folks aren't just lumping these numbers together. And then, curious to know with it was on my list, Mr.
Yeah.
Archer. With the de-escalation trainings, our parents, do they get access to that, to see what's being taught and see what's, to get that input?
So, as the de-escalation part, I'm not sure that we have a mechanism for that, but we can certainly look at it and how we could get something, be it a video or something on our webpage the parents could see. That's a good idea.
Just so they're able to make this a collaborative thing, because there may be something that educators are looking at and that a parent may necessarily know or see that this may need to be lifted up. And then the final question I had on here was, when seclusion is being used as that last resort, how are parents being notified? Is it immediately? Is it, within the end of the school day? What is that timeline for a parent to be notified?
That day? Yeah, so if it's a seclusion, it is something that they're expected to make sure at least a phone call to let them know that it has happened. And I would say just about immediately. And then we have a certain criteria to put the report in, right? But the goal is that that we're not robotic about this. It's not about the tool. It's about communicating with families. And so as soon as possible.
And is there any mechanism or any course of action for a school leader who does not notify that family immediately? Because, again, it has our expectation for that family to be notified the same day. However, if a principal feels the need not to notify them, what does that accountability look like?
That's the key word, accountability.
That is, I think, one of the things we want people to understand, that if there's a requirement that you report and share with parents, you need to have a really good reason to share with me why you didn't do it. The building caught on fire, blah, 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 but nobody has the luxury not to report. And so when that becomes apparent, to me, it becomes a disciplinary issue then. But we just, in this instance, we cannot refuse take our time to report. And so I appreciate Dr. Walker's words. Our expectation is immediately.
I will say that Paul's team, once an incident's put into right now it's an Infinite Campus, into the reporting system, that team is calling the school immediately. What happened? How did it happen? When did it happen? What does it look like? They are making sure all of the details that even were written accurately, and that we have a real good understanding and scope of what's going on. So as soon as we find out about it, we don't even leave it just as a record that was written at the school. There's a phone call made almost every time.
And then, I guess on the other side of that, for the student's perspective, what mechanisms are put in place to ensure that the student is, safe and de-escalated? What tools are we using to make sure that that student is also feeling supported and seen as well?
So if it's a special ed child, in that BIP, it should detail all of those things, what the adults are going to do if they get in crisis mode, and then what they're going to do afterwards. So that should be where it's detailed, because again, it's per student, it's whatever they need. I'll let them speak to their
That's a behavior intervention plan, so that we provide those for students who need that. Yeah.
And are we notifying teachers when there is a BIP? Do they have to sign off on it? That number one, they've acknowledged it, that they know? Because the problem that I saw when I was in the classroom is that if you didn't log in the ECATs at the time, or you didn't get we had the little goldenrod sheets that teachers would receive in their mailbox, a teacher may not know that that student had a BIP or had an IEP in the moment. So I just want to make sure that the teachers are also aware. And if they are aware and they're choosing not to, again, how are they being held accountable to that as well?
So from the special ed side, we have a process that we roll out at the beginning of the year where schools, special ed teachers usually gather those up. And ECATS gave us a really good process a couple years ago where there's a place for teachers to sign off that they have read and understand the IEP. They get their copy, but we also have a copy where teachers have signed off that they reviewed it. They're supposed to upload those in ECATS. so that should I get a call from a parent, I can go check and say, and a parent says they're not following my child's IEP, I don't think they know, I can go in and look, well, on such and such date, so-and-so signed that he had a copy and understood.
And then is there a particular time frame that says you have to acknowledge this and sign this by this date? I mean,
We usually do it during we usually ask they do it during pre-planning because those children are, now where we get into the weeds sometime is when schedules change and that sort of thing, and schools should have a plan for that.
I know we're coming up to like the 30-day mark of school. I just want to ensure that every teacher has been
Right.
aware that there's an IEP, has signed off, because we do not want the progress that your team has made, Dr. Allred, to revert back. And so just
Right.
make sure that everyone is aware and we're holding everyone accountable.
Right.
Are there any? Ms. Moore?
I'm sorry, I found my question, and I don't even know how I was going to let that slip through, considering we scrolled through data relatively quickly, and I would be remiss if I sat at this table and not talk about the disproportionalities that we just saw in this data.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're going to act like we didn't just see that data around disproportionality of black students. There, I said it. So, with that said, what is the training that staff is going to be given to help use alternative ways of interacting with students? Because this data can only spring forth if an adult deems that this is the behavior that actually happened. So is it the lens of the staff that needs to change, or the lens of the student? Or is something wrong with the lake, or is something wrong with the fish?
We know the answer to that,
Okay,
right?
so I'm looking forward that we fix the lake,
Yes, ma'am.
so that we don't keep seeing this disproportionality of data that's showing up.
Yes,
But I
ma'am.
could not leave this table without not acting like we didn't just scroll through that data really fast to see these numbers that make no sense. Because it's telling a story and a narrative that I have a hard problem with trying to understand and define around these 544 students. That this many students is always a problem. I have a hard lens of that being of that same culture. I know that can't be the case all the time. So I'm looking for, how do we fix that narrative? I don't know how that we can do it with staff, but someone needs to check the lake water and figure out how we're going to fix it.
And I think that the goal would be that those de-escalation strategies and the relationship building, because to me, those are the key there. And it's really understanding our children. One of the great things that like a board certified behavior analyst can dig into is, what is the trigger? We call that the antecedent. Like, what's happening just before that's causing the behavior, and maybe we need to adjust that antecedent to be proactive so the behavior doesn't happen. Sometimes they're trying to get, we call it a consequence, but it's an outcome. Like, sometimes they're trying to get some sort of sensory input. And we need to dig into some of these children that are on that 544 list and figure out what's the antecedent, what's the consequence, and how do we adjust those to change the child's behavior. And that's how we fix the lake, is by adjusting the antecedent and the consequence.
Okay. Okay. I look forward to holding us to that.
Thank you.
She might have had a specific follow-up.
Yeah, I want to follow up to what Board Member Rice has raised. Also, this is not really new data. Like, we are constantly seeing this. So I guess my question, not for us to answer right now in this moment, but my question would be, what are we planning to do differently? Not just the escalation tactics that have been utilized for many, many years, but what are we planning on doing differently? And by differently, I mean by making it a requirement for there to be some type of calming station in classrooms in a school, like a school-wide calming station. Just thinking about, how are we approaching this in a different, innovative, impactful way for students, making it a policy that these are the things that we're going to follow to make sure that there is accountability around seclusion rooms. I just want to put that out there.
That's what we have to make sure schools understand as well.
Did you have any? The de-escalation, when I just go back to that for a second, What is the training, who is the training geared towards?
Adults, like
Adults to de-escalate
children. So
all children?
children that are getting escalated, like it talks about,
But I mean, like, all 160,000, or are we talking about special education?
so the training, the de-escalation training works on any, like what works with special ed
Okay, good.
kids also works for regular.
Right, I just didn't know
Right.
if it was
And
specific.
it's not, we're not training folks to do this for special ed kids. We're
That's what I
training
was-
them, when a child starts demonstrating these behaviors, like dysregulatory behaviors, these are the things, and sometimes it's just managing myself.
That's right.
So a child gets escalated, starts getting upset, I naturally have to internally say to myself, calm, low voice, few words. But that is counterintuitive to what we do when we are around children that are escalating. So it's training adults to act against their instincts almost. I used to use something called CAR, calm, aware, and responsive. I'm calm. I'm making sure that my voice is low. I'm not using a lot of words because when children are in crisis, and they are in crisis when they're dysregulated, their ability to understand language is difficult. But what do? We just start talking at them. So it's not rocket science, but it's just helping me manage myself so that I can appropriately respond to a child, if that makes
So
sense.
just where I'm going with this, we just had a presentation before this on mental
Yep.
health, and some of the reasons why is what comes in from outside the school.
Right.
And so I don't want us to just like put it on a website. I would like to see us proactively send it to all parents at the beginning of the school year or whenever to say, to include the why from the previous conversation and to be more proactive with it because I don't know everything as a parent, and you
Right.
know, there's a lot of parents out there that we struggle and we lose our temper too, and if it's practices for that, then maybe it helps reduce the impact of what's coming into the school.
Woman response. Just a quick follow-up question to back to that is around training staff about how are they even defining escalation. We do have now in policy, I might add, I'm excited to put that in, we need cultural competency training because what really might be happening may not be happening to the eyes of a culture. And so how are we helping staff identify what's escalation in your eyes is not escalation in somebody else's eyes? That there's a different way of handling something that is really not what we think it is. We have tons of data and research that shows, and through psychologists, I wish Dr. Corliss was still here, that eyes turn to certain children when things are done and they're not even doing anything. We have the data in the research. So it's really, while our students are important, it's really about teaching the people that are handling the children. What do you really see? And how do you identify? What checklist can you do to say that you want to say something to somebody because of what you think you see and it's really not there? So what I know some of those things are very hard to measure and hard to grasp, but I think these are the conversations that while our national society has changed about what we can and can't do, we still have a duty at this board table to still make sure certain things are real. We believe in research-based stuff, regardless of what may be happening on a national stage. And the reality is, what people see all the time is not what it really is, which is why we're going to take into account about what these numbers look like, regardless of our data and our research of what that says. The truth of the matter is, all of that data and research is always in the eye of the beholder. What do you really see? Because we're collecting data on something that may not be happening, and that's the conversations that I hear from families that email me. That's the things that I had to bring aware for my own children that had IEPs and Section 504s. It's not always what it looks like.
Ms. Rice, I appreciate all of that comment and everything from the board. You know, again, this shows people how very difficult all of this work is, because we just had a presentation about mental health, and what we want teachers to be able to know and do to intervene on the behalf of children. Now we've got a presentation to talk about seclusion and restraint, and what we want teachers to know about de-escalation, blah, blah, blah. And we haven't even talked about academics and what it is we want teachers to not only know about their pedagogy, but those additional things that we want them to know to become better teachers. And so that's where we need the public to understand that this work is rocket science. It requires a lot, and that's why we've got to pay teachers accordingly, because what we expect them to do today is way more than what was expected. I shouldn't say 30 years ago when I was a teacher. I did have a birthday yesterday along with someone else sitting yesterday. But that is what's tough about this work. And people need to understand that you just don't show up and teach your English class or teach your second grade course. There's tons more that goes along with it. And we have to do all of these things before we even get to curriculum and teaching and learning. So I appreciate this, and I hope people are listening to know the support that we need for teachers to be able to do all of this work.
And Dr. Taylor, I know we're out of time, but with what you just said, I'll forever say this. I know it sounds like we hold teachers accountable a lot, but I really want our schools to do better parent partnerships. And because it's not on the teacher alone, I held a very strong model in my home is that I am to discipline my children. That's my role and responsibility. My teacher is only supposed to teach everything that they can to my child. And at any given time that we find teachers having to step outside of their role into the disciplinary, we really have to do a better job with parent partnerships to contact those parents and for principals to be partners with those teachers, to connect with parents to say, hey, we can't do this. We need you to do something about this at home so that we can do what we need to do for our students, which is to teach them. So I'm sorry, I couldn't be remiss without saying that it's twofold. I don't want everybody to think that I'm a teacher basher, that teachers need to do everything. We need more money. But it's a parent partnership too. Parents have to do their part, and they have to know what their own child triggers are, their own child issues are within the special education space, and then they have to learn how to help their child regulate their own behaviors and not just put it on the teacher in the classroom. They came and said, that's y'all problem. No, it's our problem together. It's not a problem, it's our challenge together. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for the presentation, the discussion that took place, and so we look forward to another great dialogue and discussion as we dive deeper into the data through student achievement. So we will adjourn our September student achievement meeting.